Hello and welcome to another episode of Fundy Tidings. I'm your host Jay Remer, and with me today is Alison Smith. Alison is New Brunswick's parenting coach. Welcome back to the show, Alison.
Thank you for having me.
One of the things about raising children is their ability to grow up with resilience. We all know how important resilience is, and so this is one of the topics that we want to talk about today. What about children who actually want to know where the line is drawn? In other words, this isn't a let's chat about this kind of a thing. I just want to know where the line is, and then I won't make this mistake. I want black and white, because I know that in a number of situations life is black and white. Like you don't cross the street without looking, because you could get nailed. And this is not open to discussion. This is the way it is, period.
Yep.
So there are certain social skills that require this is the way it is because I say so.
Right.
And this is one of those topics that's not open for discussion, as opposed to the order in which you're going to do your chores.
Right.
That's up to you.
And we can just very clearly say that.
So you can be that direct.
Right. And so tone of voice is important. Timing is important. So tone of voice, we want it to be a firm, strong voice, a leader, but not the boss. Not that bossy tone of because I said so, and sounding angry and don't you dare and that sort of approach. We want to approach it as, I am an adult, I've got life experience, be confident in that, in ourselves. I know what is best in this situation. Safety, we never discuss. Now, being prepared for the child expressing that they're not happy about it, even if inside they really did need that boundary and really wanted to know where the line was, they'll still express about that. And just being there for them and allowing that. We don't have to quell their anger, their ire, their frustration, or any of that. Say, I see that you're upset. It's not fun when we can't do what we want. I get frustrated too. I really wanted another cookie after supper, but having 3 was enough. And just letting them know we see where they're coming from. Sometimes that's all that we need, is just to be seen and to be heard.
Right.
Especially while setting that boundary of, this isn't okay. We just can't do that, and I can't let you do that.
Right. But what about dealing with situations where, in an ideal world, it's nice to sit down and have a conversation and say, but what, in the real world, people get fired. People die. Shit happens, so to speak.
Right.
What do we do to teach resilience to children, so that they get that life isn't always a bowl of cherries, and if you're not happy about it, well, let's sit down and chat about it. Sometimes life doesn't work that way, and so I guess my question is, where does the resilience part come into play as far as facing the real world? In other words, it's one thing to wrap them in swaddling clothes and make sure that they don't get bruised. It's another thing for them to see reality. And there must be a time when that is more appropriate. Is that a fair question?
It is, and it's really a slow progression. The 2-year-old doesn't need to face reality and the reality of the adult world. We don't tell 4-year-olds, for example, about the realities of war. We ease them into it, and while we're easing them into it, we're not patting them in bubble wrap. We're patting them in this sense of confidence and security that all is right in the world and all is good and safe while they're young, and that's what they need. As they age and developmentally, they're more ready to handle the grays as opposed to the black and whites. We can start having more of those conversations at down times, not when it's right beside the street, but maybe later. And the third piece about that, and I've already lost it. I always have a lot to say. Struggle. This is something it's kind of like Parenting 101 is the how to keep them alive and fed and clean and all of that stuff. And then we've got sort of the the university level of, okay, well, how can we be a guide for our kids as opposed to a boss? What are the finer points of that conversation that I want to have with them as they're facing a friend issue and that sort of thing? Then the graduate level is even a little more in depth, and it's recognizing that kids need to have struggle, but we don't create that struggle for them hoping it will teach them a lesson. We allow them to have some struggle, and we are there with them as they learn to handle it. Mm-hmm. So by going through some struggle, for instance, I can't have a third cookie, I'm really upset about this, letting them sit with that big emotion. Mm-hmm. It can be a little scary for us if we weren't raised with those big emotions, because it feels like, oh, we have to get rid of those at all cost. Mm-hmm. But if we can get to the place where we're allowing those big emotions in us and in them mm-hmm. safely, and giving that space for it, suddenly they come out the other side and they realize, oh, I could handle that. I did have support while mm-hmm. I was doing that, right. while I had that big feeling or raged against the injustice of cookie time. They realize that they can handle more than they thought they could.
Right, right.
And it's those kinds of experiences over time from age 2 to mm-hmm. 18 that builds their resilience.
Right. Good.
But it's not the creation of those situations on purpose to make them suffer and learn the
right.
lesson. It's helping them experience the lesson, being with them as they go through it, and so that they are ready to do it on their own when right. they're old enough.
So another question that pops up is that of sibling jealousy. So if you've got a couple of kids, you know, they're, I suppose, vying for one another's attention to let's see who can be the most popular with mommy today. And I'm sure there are other motivating factors for that, but I'm sure that they're quite natural. It's what happens in the natural world as pecking orders are established. How do you handle that in the world of gentle parenting?
Well, it's always safety first. We always say that in the family. Get the kids to repeat it. What do we do first? Safety first. It's fun when they're little. They like to chime in. But really that is the most important. Obviously, if one of them is hurting the other, separating them, getting between them, moving one. It doesn't always have to be the one who's instigating the aggression. Mm-hmm. We can move the one who is being instigated upon and move them off and say, hey, why don't we just go read a book for a few minutes and just give a little break. So the safety. One thing that I teach parents is to use the line, I won't let you do that. To do it calmly, but with firmness and letting them know that we mean it. We might even be putting a hand in between, picking up a child gently and saying, I won't let you hit your sister. I won't let you pull that away, something mm-hmm. like that. So that would be the safety, physical safety part. But there's also emotional safety. Mm-hmm. And this comes from understanding where the aggression or the upset might be coming from. Mm-hmm. So let's take the toddler who suddenly has had their world turned upside down by this new mewling little baby who comes in and takes everyone's attention and they ooh and ah over the baby. We need to allow that older child to express that this just feels unfair. Feels unfair. You had us all to yourself and now you have to share, Mom. I get it, that's not fun. And then we can move on to other things and talk about, well, you know what, tomorrow you and I are going to go do something special together. Mm-hmm. And just letting them know in very clear terms that they're still a huge part of our world and still mm-hmm. very important as well.
I know that, I see a lot of children today, especially in town here where oftentimes there's a 2-year-old involved. And what they say about 2-year-olds, from my research, which is limited, is absolutely true. They're impossible. And they are going to push every single button. It's part of what they're on this planet to do. Mm-hmm. And so reasoning with a 2-year-old it's pretty much out of the question as far as what I've been able to see. So I'm just wondering, when you're dealing with a 2-year gap, you know, we've got the infant and the 2-year-old, or the 2-year-old and the 4-year-old, or whatever the combination might be. Somebody's going to be 2. And you just are going to lose your mind if there's not, there has to be a way to accept that 2-year-olds are 2-year-olds, and there's parts of it that their life is going to be miserable because they need to learn that they cannot have their own way. But at the other hand, there has to be some reasonableness about it, so that you're not actually being mean-spirited and that there isn't a safety issue. But you're dealing with an irrational unit. And I'm just curious as to, you know, I mean, this is really a big challenge, because
I've had 2.
The next, I was 2 once, because the next question that we're going to deal with is going to be one about tantrums. And so this is just sort of getting ready for that. But what do we do about 2-year-olds? Because it's a real question, and our viewers really...
It's a real struggle.
It is a real struggle.
The struggle is real.
And it's okay, I think, is the bottom line.
We can handle it. They can handle it. We just might need a few more tools and a little bit of a different shift in how we understand it.
Yeah. So how do you explain it?
The Dutch have a great way to describe this stage of development. They call it the boundary stage. They don't have the same degree of struggle and control issues and fights with their 2-year-olds that we do here in North America. And everything that I've read on the topic is that they recognize that this is normal, and if a child weren't to push boundaries and ask for more and want to do more and say no, if they didn't do that, there would be something wrong, because they are designed to do that. That's how they navigate the world at age 2. And viewers should know that that could start as early as 18 months, or they might think they've gotten past it and they're out of the woods. It might not start till 2.5. And for some parents, they find 2 was okay, but 3 was tough. So just recognizing that this boundary stage is coming, or it's already here, and that is completely normal. One thing that is important for us to do to help through this stage, so one, we don't lose our minds, because we could if we get caught up in, oh, they shouldn't do that, they should just know better. So to keep ourselves calm so that we can be calm for our kids. I know it's really easy to say, hard to do. It does take some conscious effort to stop reacting and to start to choose our response, but it is possible. The reason we want to be calm is, one, so we don't get into that part of our brain, that physiological response that our children are in, that we don't join their meltdown, that we are calm enough to make the decisions for both of us when they can't. Because recognizing that a 2-year-old really can't control themselves, they don't have the upper reasoning ability that we do, the logic, thinking of what happens when I do this, then this happens. They really can't. They're just responding, and they're flooded with emotions. Their bodies really are having a huge response. So we need to be calm to help them become calm and to learn the skills, which may take 1,001 times, so that they can eventually, when they're a little bit older and ready, they can start using those skills too. Another reason for being calm is it sends the message to our child that we can handle what's happening. We can handle their big emotions. And that gives them the message that, oh, if mom can handle it, I can too. If we suddenly lose it as well, we're in the middle of Walmart and we're both having a tantrum, that sends the message to them that these big emotions are scary and that there's something to be upset about and more worried about. Because, wow, my mom's losing it, this must be pretty bad, or I must be pretty bad if my mom can't handle it. So we want to instill that idea that we're their rock, we're their leader, we can handle things when they can't.
So taking things in stride is a big, sends a good message to children that that this is not a big deal. Because when you really look at it, there are very few things that are a big deal. You know, most things that we turn into big deals are not big deals. But because for any variety of reasons that are pre-programming and all the rest of it, we don't have the wherewithal, we don't have the trigger mechanism to say, stop, relax here.
That never works.
So no, it doesn't.
Doesn't work for us either.
No, but we need to get to that stage
where we tell ourselves.
Where we tell ourselves.
Yes.
So,
yes.
do you have any tricks,
yes.
If necessary, for parents to flip the switch from being sort of hysterical, out of control parents into, okay, I'm hysterical, out of control, I need to flip the switch, and so, because trigger mechanisms are very helpful, and I'm just wondering what ones you recommend.
Obviously, there's lots of prevention and there's lots of after-the-fact stuff that we can do, but in the moment is really critical to be able to take ourselves from this fight or flight freeze response to, okay, I can handle this, here's our plan. That's a big, big gap if we let ourselves get to that point. But it does happen. No matter how much we prevent and how much we plan ahead, sometimes we just do get there. If we can practice breathing ahead of time, our body will more automatically know to do that. For instance, we had, not that long ago, we had a moment in the grocery store. A lot happens shopping, right? And I was very frustrated with my kids. I was tired, they were hungry and hangry. Hungry plus angry is hangry. It just wasn't going well. We shouldn't have been shopping, but we really just didn't have a choice that day. So I started to lose it, and I started to sound like the person I didn't want to sound like. And, you know, yeah, I lose it sometimes too. If I hadn't had the practice of a certain type of breath, I might not have used it. So I had been spending some time consciously, when things are calm, practicing a certain breath. And this breath is to breathe in or to breathe out longer than you breathe in. And that sends the signal to the brain that things are safe, that we are safe. So if it's a 2 second in, it's 4 seconds out. If it's 3 seconds in, 5 seconds out. And that slow breath can be that one little ounce of help that we need to get to the next stage where we can do the next trick. Well, another trick that we can do is to just gently squeeze our arm. And we can teach this to our kids. So that kind of distracts the brain, and it's also kind of a relaxing sensation. It has to be a fairly firm squeeze. It's better if they do it to themselves, because if we're angry, we don't want to be squeezing our child. And just that gentle squeeze. But again, practice it ahead of time, so in the moment, you're like, oh yeah, that thing I've been doing all week, let's do that. And doing it with them. What's really important for our kids' meltdowns or tantrums or big feelings is that we help them self-regulate. And self-regulate is when we tell ourselves, okay, I can do this, I've got this, I can calm myself. Kids can't do that on their own at a young age. We have to do it first and then help them do it. And we can't do that when we're emotional and freaking out and having our own meltdown. So knowing that in our own minds helps us as well, because in the moment we know, oh my goodness, I'm the parent, I'm the grown-up here, I'm the only one who knows how to do this and is capable of this. Everybody's counting on me. And that little bit of self-imposed pressure can actually be a good thing, because we know the team is counting on us. If we don't do it, nobody will. And sometimes that can be enough of a trigger to say, okay, use some of those skills that you know.
So what happens when you're dealing, because I get a lot of questions about children and grandparents and parents. What happens when you're basically dealing with what, when we were growing up, we would consider a spoiled brat, and they're just having a brat attack? It's not a meltdown. There's no real reason for there's no fear involved that's evident to us. There's no physical fear. They're just being.
Is it more of a call for a boundary? Do you feel?
It could be a call for a boundary, but it is an act of defiance And so that could be looking for a boundary. But I'm wondering for our viewers who hear, oh, Joey's having a meltdown, or Joey's having a tantrum, or Joey's being a brat.
Different things.
So I'm just wondering how you sort of draw the line and you define these things, because a meltdown, for instance, has an implication, or it sounds like it's just suddenly they've become overwhelmed. Is this a newly discovered phenomenon, or have we been having meltdowns for centuries and calling it something else?
We have been. We've been inclined to lump it all together with tantrums. And there have been times when we've just called it all acting bratty or being bratty or something like that. But now that we're learning more about the brain and the physical mechanisms that are happening during this time and child development, we've learned so much in the last 5, 10, 20 years that we just didn't have the benefit of knowing before.
Right.
And we know that a meltdown is separate from a tantrum. So a meltdown is that emotional overload. They just can't handle it anymore. The emotion needs to come out and they need some support. Actually, the child in all three of those scenarios does need support. They need guidance. The tantrum, in my view, is more of the call for attention, call for support, but it may not be an emotional overwhelm. It's a different kind of call for support. I do hesitate to label children as brats, or that they're being a brat, as that implies that they are doing it out of malicious spite, and it changes how we interact with them. But if we label all of that as, my child is having a hard time, they need something, then we're in the mindset that we're going to search for what it is they need.
So how do you differentiate, for instance, because the way we view, say, a child who is
demanding
and who actually does have malicious intent. Like, in other words, I am mad and you're going to pay attention to me. So that can happen at the age of 3.
Right.
It can happen at the age of 13. And it can happen at the age of 65.
Exactly.
And I'm just wondering, where do you make the distinction with a child, or how do you know whether a child is doing it because they're being defiant or because they really are at sea and need nurturing?
If they're being defiant, there's still a need. There's something that they're not able to get met. And they're searching for ways that are going to work to fill that need to some degree. So if it's defiance, they may be looking for more control. They may not necessarily be trying to control the adult, but it's the only thing that's giving them that sense of power. Perhaps there's another way that we can meet that need that is pleasing to both parties. So for example, if the child who wants to be in control of their own world gets to that point, we might have been able to prevent that if we gave them choice on their morning routine, the 5 steps, what order they do it, when they were 2. But maybe that's gone on a long time, and they have been, year after year, seeking that power and control. They really want that control over themselves and their own life. But it comes out in a different way. So
I guess what we have to keep in mind is that children are children, and that we are responsible for them on all levels.
They're not little adults.
They're not little adults. No. And that I think is a big step, because we want them to be little adults, because we know how to communicate with adults. We don't necessarily get what it's like because we weren't taught that. So
we don't have the same models.
No. So the new research that's come out in the last really 5 years and before, but really it's that recent. I mean, it's happening. Brand new research is happening now. It's very important. So I guess to sort of wrap things up, I think it's very important for people to have compassion for themselves and for their children, and to realize that these behaviors are natural, you know, they are usual, they happen, and that it's okay, and that to get upset about it is basically not going to do anybody any good. Is that a fair assessment?
Definitely. I wouldn't want parents to feel that they have to put up with all of the behaviors, knowing that they're natural is very different from, okay, now what? What's our plan now? We can't let the behavior continue.
Right.
We still need to address it. But that compassion can go a long way within our own minds of how we respond to that child, which will then foster that emotion the relationship that's going to keep us as an influence in their life, a strong influence, someone that they turn to.
Well, you know, and I think self-compassion is very important too, because this is a new age of parenting that you're talking about, and we are going to falter. And so we need to give ourselves a break. If we make a mistake and we think, oh, I wish I hadn't have said that, or I wish I hadn't have done that, we do need to take the time out. And I mean, if you're going to have children, you have to realize that there's an investment of time for the next 20 years that you're going to have to make, or otherwise, you know, you might want to think twice about having children, because it's a big deal. But I think that we also are human beings, and we are going to make mistakes, and especially when it comes to this new kind of parenting. So we do need to give ourselves a bit of a break every now and again.
And just understand, our kids are learning, we're learning. I probably learn as much from my kids as they learn from me. I learn about myself, I learn about relationships, and just knowing that we're all just working on figuring it out, and just ask ourselves, so now what? Yeah, I messed up, or my child messed up, or we had a big blow up together. Now what?
Yeah. So being mindful about being aware of what's actually going on in your life is really what it boils down to.
Awareness is key to the whole thing.
Alison, thank you very much for coming on the show. It
My
was
pleasure.
Really, it's fascinating, and I'm so intrigued. So many new techniques and ideas are coming about parenting, and hopefully the baggage that we've carried into our own lives will be less for them. Anyway, thanks for coming on, and thank you for watching the show today. I look forward to seeing you on another episode of Fundy Tidings soon.